Welcome to the inaugural episode of the Swipe Savvy podcast brought to you by CreditVerse, where we explore credit cards and personal finance in Canada. I'm joined today by my co-host and co-founder of CreditVerse, Alyan. What are we talking about today?
Today's just a bit of intro about what CreditVerse really is. So we're going to talk about some of the things we offer, how CreditVerse really got started, what we see CreditVerse going in the future, and just kind of a couple of topics around that.
All right, so what is CreditVerse?
It's a pretty fun question. It's one of the more loaded questions I think we both get asked on a daily basis. I don't really know exactly how to say it, but I think CreditVerse is really just an educational platform at this point. There's a couple of different avenues we take with that. There's the website, there's some of the Instagram posts, there's the YouTube channel, now there's this podcast. So we really just give education about credit cards and personal finance in general. And it all kind of started when I decided I wanted to start getting some cards that had some annual fees, and I wanted to see if I'd have a good chance of getting them. As we know, a lot of credit cards have minimum income requirements or, generally minimum credit score requirements, so they always don't really post this on their sites. So I thought, why not just go to Reddit, see I want to apply for the Amex Gold, for example. I'd had a credit card for about 6 months at this point, so my credit score wasn't the highest, and obviously I was a student as well, so I didn't really have that much income. So I was just trying to see what people were approved for with the card. And I just went to Reddit, took some data, put it into a spreadsheet, and called it a day. And I thought, okay, cool, I'll probably get the Amex Gold if I apply for it now. And I thought to do this for more and more cards as I want to start getting some more points so I could fly back home and, really lower that cost a little bit. And I thought, well, if I'm putting this in a spreadsheet, I may as well share it with my friends, just put on a graph because graphs are pretty. And then I thought, well, if I'm putting on a bunch of graphs, I might as well put on a website so it's really easy for everyone to access. And I thought, okay, putting on a website, might as well just make it a decent looking website that everyone can look at, around all of Canada and maybe even the world, and they can see what credit score and income they need. Because I'm already doing all the work at this point, I might as well just make and help as many people as I possibly can. So that's kind of how the base of credit card started. That tool is still on our site called StackUp. We've worked quite a bit on trying to improve it, make it more effective, and make it easier to use so that you can just put in your credit score and your income and see what cards you'd likely be eligible for or be approved for. But it's kind of a work in progress, but it's really how CreditVerse started. And I'm really interested to see, or I've been interested to see over the past couple of years how it's really grown.
Yeah, for sure. So let's take a step back and give the people some context. We talked about what CreditVerse is. Who are you?
So my name is Alyan Bhanji. I'm a finance student at the University of Western Ontario, and I've always really liked personal finance. I remember, my parents were business owners, so I got to really experience that on a first-hand basis. And then I always had a little bit of, they always tried to really instill that value of money into me. And I think I started to like personal finance a lot because I thought, a dollar saved is a dollar earned. And then it kind of expanded to being a little bit more creative, like falling into like the credit card concept, how point programs work and other things like that. But I really like traveling outside of all the work we do in personal finance and school. I like watching hockey, Formula One, playing video games on occasion, reading. It's just a bit of everything, I think, at this point. I think that's my interest really aligned with a lot of what CreditVerse was able to provide, and I think a lot of the work we do on CreditVerse. Do you want to give a bit of insight on yourself?
Sure. So I'm also a finance student here at Western, and I think we're pretty similar people, sharing a lot of interests, and I think that's why we work so well together on this venture. But I think going back to why I joined CreditVerse, obviously you came to me with the idea. It was really about finding a way to bring that personal finance knowledge to everybody, implementing some sort of education aspect to it. You obviously are really passionate about the credit card side of it and kind of deploying that knowledge. But I think more broadly what I try to implement and what I'm trying to do with this podcast, I think, is go even more diverse and just talk about personal finance because it's something that we weren't taught in school. It wasn't part of our curriculum. I know it's starting to be implemented into the curriculum today, but the importance that it has on our life isn't emphasized at a young age, unless it's your parents or family. So I think this is something I'm really passionate about and a way for me to kind of express that passion and share that knowledge. So that's the main reason that I'm here today doing what I'm doing.
I'm interested to see where this passion for really teaching came from. You've done a lot of work with improving like the educational aspects of CreditVerse, expanding it more from just, what are the best offers right now, how to travel, how to really get the maximum value out of points, to just, I guess, a more general sense of, how do we increase our credit scores? What are some of the aspects that go into that? How do you pay off debt effectively? Where did that, I know the link is there between finance and teaching. Where did that teaching part really start?
It's a good question, and I don't have an answer for you. I also tutor on the side, just high school, etc., different topics. So, I just enjoy. I think it comes down to I enjoy sharing knowledge and spreading knowledge. Don't know where it came from. Don't know why I enjoy doing it, but I've been doing it. I continue to do it, and there has to be a reason for it. I just don't know what that reason is, and I'm not complaining. It's a pretty cool trait to have, I think, and it's one of the reasons CreditVerse is where it is today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've added a lot in that sense because I think teaching has always been very important to me, but I think my vision of CreditVerse was a bit too narrow. I'd say it was very drilled in on the credit card side of things, which is fair enough. I think it's fair to have a niche, but there's so much potential here to really expand it further and make it useful for everyone in every single category. You don't need to want to have a credit card. You don't want to have to do things with credit. Just kind of building the foundational blocks about personal finance, and maybe we're going to get into investing later on in the future, and other concepts like that I think would be very fun to explore.
Yeah. So speaking of which, we talked about where CreditVerse started. Mm-hmm. Before we talk about where it's headed, where is it right now?
So I think that fact of it still being an educational platform is really where CreditVerse is right now. I think a lot of our effort goes into the content side of things. So whether that be the YouTube, it'd be this podcast, it'd be the Instagram posts, the Reels, whatever that entire bucket of content creation ends up being. I think a little bit we switch focus more from the website to the content side, but I think maybe something in the future we want to do is move back towards that website side. I think there's a lot of potential there we still can develop and really improve upon some of the baseline things we set up. Because I remember it going from I don't know if you remember the way of how YouTube started, but it started off with us having a website. We worked on that for 4 months straight. That's all we did every single day after class, all the time on the weekends. And then one day we were like, oh, let's just launch a YouTube video. And we thought we'd do one every month, one every couple of months. And that's how it really started. But our focus really shifted from the website, which we thought we developed to a reasonable point, I'd say, where it didn't really need that much more work on a recurring basis, other than some of the articles, I think. But I guess that's really content. To really focusing on the YouTube channel now, I think YouTube takes up 70% of our time working on CreditVerse. So it's been a bit of a shift, but I don't know. Have you enjoyed that?
I think it's definitely been a worthwhile shift and something that needed to happen. We really found something that worked, found something that we enjoyed doing, and just went for it and continue to go for it. I think what we're doing now is not necessarily slowing down, but maybe slowing down a little bit on the YouTube, bringing it to once every 2-3 weeks. So it gives us time to not only create better videos, but also spend time on things like the website, which has suffered lately, and bring in new things like this podcast, focus more on other avenues. So kind of diversifying while maintaining a strong presence on YouTube. And I think that channel will continue to be the main factor of CreditVerse, or our main form of media, at least for the next year or two.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think while we're still both in school, YouTube will probably be what we spend most of our time on, or I would say a good chunk of time on. After that, I think it's going to become potentially a bit more sporadic, depending on how our work schedules work out. But something that's good about the articles and some of the other content is that it doesn't always have to be us behind the screen. We can hire writers, we can hire people who also are very, very passionate about sharing some of their knowledge, and potentially they could appear on screen as well. But, it's hard having someone who fills all the boxes, and if we have someone who just wants to, the Instagram posts, that would be great. And I think we just want to continue spreading the knowledge in the long term. Speaking about the long term, I guess, where do you see CreditVerse headed now? We had some conversations over the summer, but I think our goals have diverged a little bit since then.
Yeah, it's tough to say. We have a lot of things in the works right now, which we've talked about, being upgrading the website and introducing this podcast, just revamping everything, really. In terms of the future, it's really uncertain. I see the YouTube channel becoming more prominent. I see the website becoming more stable. and I see us shifting more towards a casual, kind of a casual feeling. And I think that's what this podcast is going to introduce, and it'll probably spread throughout the entire CreditVerse ecosystem, I guess. Where do you think it's headed?
Again, I think it's really hard to say. Our lives evolve so rapidly on a day-to-day. Like, I think in the last 3 months, we've definitely grown a lot as individuals, and I think our day-to-day has changed so drastically. So it's hard to really predict a year out in advance. Like, if we're looking back a year from now, we didn't have a YouTube channel, and now it takes up most of our time. So I think with projects like this, where you're able to pivot very quickly, you don't really have a lot of obligations in that sense where, you want to make a lot of money out of some aspect, or, you're very profit driven. It's harder to really pivot. But I think for us, it's relatively straightforward to kind of move around our time, do things that we think provide the most value at that point in time, and then move forward from there. I think there's some things that we talked about with the website. We want to have some more tools on there. Of course, those take quite a long time to develop. We're like 8 months into one, and we're not really even sure it's going to work. But it's just one of those things where I feel like it would be a big value add to have tools like that. While also, focusing on some of the really baseline things. The Stack Up tool becoming much more accurate, I think, is a big part. And I think we've learned a couple of things in school that would help us maybe refine that a little bit, make it more effective, and then just make it a better tool for everyone to use. We don't really want to monetize a lot of this because I think I don't know for you, but for me, it's a little bit about giving back. I think I've been very fortunate to be in a very privileged position for a lot of my life, where I've had a lot of very good people around me who've motivated me and really helped me develop into the person I am today. And I think it's important for me to give back a lot of that as well. I'm fortunate that I got to learn about a lot of the personal finance side of things when I was very, very young, but I know it's hard if your parents don't really teach you, if you don't learn it in school. So just giving back on that sense, and I think we're both going to be pretty okay outside of that, where we don't really need to monetize CreditVerse as something that would be a large part of our income. But I think we had this conversation as well. So you want to dive into a little bit of that and why we chose that it wasn't the best idea from your side?
I think there's not much I can really add to that. I pretty much share the same feelings. It's about giving back. It's about sharing our knowledge, and that's why I joined this venture in the first place, and that's why I'll continue to do this. Now, I am going to pause there and shift towards this podcast because, this is the introductory episode. We've talked a lot about CreditVerse. We've talked a lot about ourselves. Let's talk about this podcast. Obviously, I brought this idea up, but what do you envision this podcast to be?
So I think I envision this podcast to be a very wide range of things. First off, I think we're going to really break it down to the basics and have a much more longer form style where we can really have a conversation as opposed to, a YouTube video where you have like a checklist you need to fill out. I think obviously it's not a back and forth conversation necessarily. We do encourage you to comment, ask any questions you have down there or any suggestions you have as well. But I think the both of us will be able to talk a little bit more about really the basics of personal finance and credit cards. And, just have a much more casual way of explaining that as opposed to it being in a much, I would say more scripted and, very structured format, which I think some people enjoy. Like, for example, when I'm cooking, I like listening to podcasts. So I wouldn't necessarily watch a YouTube video while I'm cooking because it would just be a very different experience. Outside of that, I think we're also going to be able to dive into some much more niche topics. It's pretty easy for us to set up a couple of cameras, talk for 30 minutes about a very specific topic. For example, I would say even more specific than preferred pricing, which I guess we released a video on recently. Having a 30 or 35-minute conversation about that, where we can add a lot of the stuff we had to leave out in the video, like a lot of the data we collected, how we collected the data, some of the other insights we had as well. It's hard putting that in an 8-minute video when you have to really skew towards keeping the average watch time high, making sure people don't leave the video, making sure we have good visuals in there all the time. I think this is just going to be a much more casual way for us to flick on the cameras, just kind of have a chat and go from there. Where did you really see this going when you brought up the idea?
I think the main idea was to bring about more than just credit cards and kind of expand into the entire world of personal finance. And I think what we kind of discussed is bringing one specific topic for each episode, whether that be, it could be credit cards, it could be real estate investing, any number of topics that we can dive into. And I think it's just like you said, a more casual way of delivering that knowledge. We could even touch on videos that we've already made, but just talk about them in a more casual way, in a different sense. And at the end of the day, some people don't want to sit down and watch a video, even if it's 8-10 minutes discussing a topic. They'd rather just sit and listen to a conversation style. So I think that's what my vision was both expanding what we're discussing and how we're discussing it. And in that sense, we can reach a whole new market that we may not have reached before. So yeah, that was my vision behind it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of putting it. That's really what our main goal is for this podcast. And I'm actually really excited to see where it goes. I guess going back to some of the other work we've done in the past, what's been your favorite thing you've done with CreditVerse? And then what are some things that you maybe haven't enjoyed nearly as much?
I think my favorite thing so far has definitely been, well, it's got to be the YouTube. Mm-hmm. And I can't narrow a specific point on the YouTube, but just not even like the outcomes. It kind of sounds bad, but like what I've learned throughout the process. I never thought I'd be in a position where I'm editing videos every week or two. I never thought I'd pick up that skill, but here I am. And, I'm not an expert by any means, but I know my way around the software now. And not just that, but just, scripting videos, filming. Like, these are all skills that may not be directly applicable to what I want to do in the future, but the soft skills I've picked up as well have been really, really key. And I think just the breadth and depth of knowledge that I've gained throughout this venture, not necessarily related to credit cards, but just in general. What about you?
I think it would also have to be the YouTube, but I think it'd be more specifically the presenting. I never really liked presenting growing up. I still don't love doing it, but I've definitely become a lot more comfortable with it now than I was like a year ago, I'd say. I think we had a presentation in one of our classes that we were presenting CreditVerse actually, about 2 months in, or 3 months in to making the YouTube channel, I think. And I would have never accepted that before. That opportunity was, it's like presenting to 150 kids about something you came up with when you were like eating dinner one night during finals week is something that I probably wouldn't have wanted to talk about for 15 minutes without really having a script or any real presentation like lined up. But it's something that we decided would be a good opportunity to take on. And I think I would never have been able to do that if I didn't have, some of that skill set built up from just presenting over and over again. Of course, I'm not spectacular at it. It's definitely like a lifelong learning kind of thing. But I think I'm getting better and better. And I think I'm much better than I was about a year ago. You can probably see with the videos, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a good place to wrap it up. A little introductory episode on what CreditVerse is, talking about us. And maybe a little sneak preview into the next episode. We're going to dive into just the basics of credit cards, kind of stay on brand with CreditVerse, at least for now. Just talk about what credit cards are, how you can use them, and some general things that you should know before using them. So whether you're knowledgeable about credit cards, or you don't even have a credit card, it's probably worth giving a listen to because you might learn something new.
Awesome. Yeah, I guess that's a good way to wrap it up. And we'll see you guys next week or next month. I don't know. When are we going to see you? Well,
soon.
Next time. Take care.
Yeah.